morning, church. Good morning. It's encouraging to be able to have a good and spiritual influence over the kids in our church and at the school district level too. So thank you, SP. Thank you for doing that. Please, let's keep on praying for her. Let's keep on praying for Manny too, because he is helping carrying that load over there too. And so they are great people. They're great. They love the Lord, and they want to be a good influence in our school district. And we need that for our kids. We definitely need that. So I just want to remind you, it's not politics at all. We just want to make sure we do our part to have for the safety of our kids. This morning, I want to encourage you to take your notes out of your bulletins. Let's take your notes out of your bulletins. You'll see some of the verses are in there if you don't have your Bible with you. But if you have your Bible with you, let's open up our Bibles in Genesis chapter 16. Genesis chapter 16. And today we are going to talk about a topic that is so important to all of us. And we're going to talk about the dangers of impatience. I don't know how patient you are, but not being patient is dangerous. It's dangerous. You make so many mistakes when you are impatient. You hurt so many people when you are impatient. I have done my share of it when I have been impatient. So today we're going to talk about the dangers of impatience. You know, I don't know if you ever found yourself in a situations when you are waiting for what seems impossible. Maybe it was waiting for a job offer that you've been waiting for a long time. Maybe you were waiting for a relationship to blossom and it didn't happen, or it hasn't happened, or even a promise you felt got made to you. But the waiting game can be one of the hardest tests of faith that we face. It's a really hard thing to do. It's really tough to wait. And if you tell me it's not hard for you to wait, then I will think you're not being honest. Because we all have trouble waiting. We all have trouble when we go to the doctor, when we go to the DMV, when we get stuck in traffic. We would love for that traffic to start flowing right away. Being patient is not easy, but it's one of the hardest tests of faith we face in our lives. And in our fast-paced world, fast-paced world where instant gratification is the norm, the virtue of patience often seems outdated. The idea of waiting on God, it doesn't just seem difficult, but sometimes it seems impossible. Waiting on God, it seems impossible many times. We want things to happen in our time, according to our plans. But God doesn't work according to my calendar. God doesn't work according to your calendar. And if we expect Him to do things the way we want, that's when disappointment comes in. That's when we experience disappointments. God has a greater view of life events. And His point of view is better than our point of view. God knows what's best for us and when is best for us. However, the part of the story of Genesis 16 where we have got to so far in our story, in our series on the life of Abraham, is the part where Abraham's wife, Sarai, becomes desperate. She becomes desperate and she becomes impatient and acts impatient and does things out of impatience, and things don't go well. Anytime you don't practice patience, most likely things are not going to go well, because sometimes we want to get ahead of God. So in chapter 15, we saw that Abraham was discouraged, remember? Last week we were talking about Abraham was discouraged. Abraham had been already 10 years, and Abraham didn't know, okay, what's going to happen, Lord? How do I know you're really going to fulfill this promise that you have given me? How do I really know it's going to happen? When is it going to happen? How am I going to inherit the land that you keep on saying I'm going to have this land and it's going to be my land? How is it going to happen? And so he's discouraged because he doesn't see things happening right away. And in chapter 16, we see now his wife, Now his wife is desperate. Now she's impatient. Okay, it's been 10 years. I'm already older, and I haven't had that child that you promised to me, God. And so God told Abraham in moments of discouragement, remember, Abraham, he said in chapter 15, I have been faithful to you. You know, you can talk to me anytime you need to talk to me, and I will always answer back to you. You got to trust. God was teaching Abraham in chapter 15, you have to trust my timing. You have to trust the things, the way I have scheduled things in my calendar, not in your calendar. But now Sarai, or Sarah, is desperate and is getting impatient. You know, remember how we have talked about before that some people can be facing the same situation? They were both waiting. One is discouraged, and the other one is impatient and desperate for things to happen. A lot of times that is not abnormal for us. That is something that we all as human beings experience often. But your impatience is a shown of our lack of trust in God many times. Impatience often tempts us to take shortcuts in life. Taking shortcuts in life is not a good idea. Because a lot of times when we take shortcuts, we don't know where we're going to end up later on because we are not waiting on God. These shortcuts can lead us a lot of times through a lot of serious consequences. When we try to rush through the process, you know, everything in life God is trying to do in our life has a process. And when we try to rush through the process or force results before the time comes, we risk compromising on quality, integrity, and potentially our future well-being. We risk a lot of things when we become impatient, but still we do. We become impatient. You know, when we talk about shortcuts, imagine you're on the road trip. When you're on the road trip, I don't know if you've ever done this before, but sometimes when we're on the road trip, navigating through unfamiliar terrain, I don't know, have you ever tried to take a shortcut? And you just got worse for you, and it's like, man, I should have just kept on following the GPS. Maybe that's why the GPS showed red. Because this part right here, I thought it was just nice to show red and blue. You know, I thought it was just, decoration on the map. But because I try to take this shortcut, now I'm in trouble. Now I'm taking longer. And sometimes you get stuck in traffic and you get stuck for a longer time. And now you got to wait a longer period of time because you were impatient. Taking shortcuts most of the times is not a good idea unless you know exactly where you're going. The biblical narrative, in Genesis 16, we see that Sarah and Abraham fell into the trap of impatience. And I'm going to say it again. They fell into the trap. Being impatient is a trap. God had promised them a child, but as time wore on, without the fulfillment of this promise, Sarah became anxious and impatient. She became anxious and restless. Instead of waiting for God's timing, she proposed Abraham a shortcut. And the shortcut was not a good one. The shortcut was a bad thing. She urged Abraham to have a child with her servant. Look, Abraham, I have a servant. God hasn't given me a child, but I have a servant, and my servant can be the vehicle to fulfill this promise. She was really desperate. She wanted to play God at that point. She didn't realize that. She was just desperate and impatient. But she was urging Abraham and said, take Hagar, my servant. And this decision was a quick fix. Have you ever tried to find a quick fix to a problem? Every time you try to find a quick fix, you don't fix the problem from the root. And so she was trying to find a quick fix here that required faith and patience. Instead of practicing faith and patience, exercising faith and patience, she became impatient. So impatience can lead us away from God's best plans for us. God has a better plan all the time, but a lot of times impatience will lead us to a different plan, and it's going to be hurtful. is going to be hurtful. Impatient, it causes us to make hasty decisions, often leading us to unintended and sometimes painful consequences. So that's why in Genesis chapter 16, the way it reads in the story, it says that now Sarai, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So she said to Abraham, the Lord has kept me from having children. So notice that she is already, let's put the text on the screen. She's already blaming God for not having children. And it says right there, God hasn't given me any children. So go sleep with my servant. Can we put the verses on the screen? It says now, go to sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can build a family through her. And Abraham said, no, Sarah, what do you think? I cannot sleep with your servant. That's what he said? No, look at what he said. And Abraham agreed. Sure, give me your servant. He agreed. He didn't have any problem with that. You're giving me a pass. So after Abraham had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took the Egyptian servant Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. So he slept with Hagar and she conceived. So Hagar got pregnant right away. But that was not God's plan. She became impatient. And in her impatience, she was desperate to help God with the plan. So let me just tell you, God doesn't need our help. He just needs for us to obey, to listen and obey. So when she knew that she was pregnant, talking about Hagar, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abraham, you are responsible for the wrong I'm suffering. Does that sound familiar? Isn't that funny? That sometimes people make a mess and then they blame somebody else. Say, hey, she was the one who suggested to Abraham. And now she's saying, it's your fault. Look at what you're doing to me. This is happening to me. She despises me because of you. It's your fault. And so Abraham, he was smart too. When he said, you're responsible for the wrong I'm suffering, I put my servant in your arms, and now that she knows she's pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. She even brought God into this thing, right? That's amazing. Now she's bringing God in it. But when she made the decision, she did not bring God in it. And then Abraham, as a good man, he says, your servant is in your hands, Abraham said. Do with her whatever you think is best. In other words, hey, don't blame me for it. I'm done with this. You told me to do that. I did it. I'm done with it. It's your fault. It's not my fault. It's your fault. So they're blaming each other. So the impatience is bringing conflict in the marriage. Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. Interesting. The story is amazing because we can learn so much about the dangers of impatience. We will learn in this story that impatience can easily lead us to poor decisions. And by understanding these dangers that we're going to go over right now, we can be encouraged to learn to trust in God's timing. If we don't learn to trust in God's timing, we are going to be in trouble. We're going to learn to trust in God's timing and wait patiently for His promises, knowing that His plans are always are going to be better than our plans. And His plans and His timing is always going to be perfect. So let us open our hearts and our minds to the lessons that we can find in this text. And the first lesson that we find in this text is that impatience leads to poor decisions. Every time you're not patient, it leads to poor decisions. It leads to poor decisions. In verse 2, I don't know, have you ever been impatient and got into the freeway at the wrong time because you were impatient? And you got stuck in traffic? And you're like, man, what did I do? Maybe I should have just got to a coffee place, get a coffee, and wait for the traffic to but I was impatient, right? And so it basically takes you sometimes the same time. If you go get a coffee and you sit at a coffee shop and you just relax and you can do some work over there, it will take the same time because you will be stuck over there in the coffee place. You can stay there and relax for a couple of hours, the couple of hours that you were going to be sitting in the freeway. Because impatience leads to poor decisions. And so that's when Sarah was impatient. And as we saw in verse 2, she said, you know what? God hasn't given me a child. So because God hasn't given me a child, let's do this. I have a plan. I have a plan. So she was impatient with God's timing. God's timing. And that impatience led her to suggest a solution that was not aligned to God's plan. Every time we get impatient, if we proceed with our own plan and we don't follow God's plan because we are desperate, because we get impatient, most of the time it's not going to lead to a good thing. The decision had significant consequences. And we'll talk about the consequence that even today we can see the consequence today of that decision that was made with impatience. You know, I don't know if you ever rush a decision in your life. I don't know if you ever rush a decision in your life that later on you'll regret. I don't know if you ever done that. I done it. I done it many times. And sometimes, you know, sometimes I go through different stages in my life, where sometimes I feel encouraged, sometimes I feel discouraged, sometimes I feel great, sometimes I feel depressed. And sometimes people go like, how do you feel depressed if you're a Christian? How do you feel depressed if you're a pastor? Oh, you can feel depressed. You can experience all the emotions. You just trust in the Lord when you feel that way. And you continue to grow in the Lord, and you continue to grow in your faith, so you get stronger during those times. It doesn't mean you don't experience it. Not saying that we don't experience those things, it doesn't help. It just means we're in denial sometimes. But we do experience those moments. And so sometimes, you know, if I think too much about maybe if I would have done this in my past, maybe if I would have done that, maybe this would have been the result. And then you're like, maybe, what if? Because a lot of times we have, because of our impatience, we have made a lot of poor decisions. Maybe you're not one of those, but I am. And a lot of times, I know people that have rushed into business ideas. And they rush and they try to do their business, and they didn't have enough patience to plan for it. They didn't have enough patience to budget for it. And then everything they invest, they lose because they were not patient. It can be a financial decisions like buying something without considering the financial implications. You know, without patience, you make poor decisions. You know, remember in 2006? And the crash that we went through in 2008, 2006, I remember a lot of people. Man, our church grew like you have no idea, from people that were moving from LA to Lancaster. The church in Lancaster was blooming, was growing so fast. And we couldn't even keep up with discipling people because the church was growing so fast, because people were desperate. Hey, we got to buy a house right now. We got to buy a house right now. And they were buying houses with the 80-20 plan. Not knowing that they were rushing into decisions that 2 years later, 3 years later, they were going to end up paying, whoever was paying $2,000, $2,500 for a house was going to end up paying $5,000 3 years later. Because they rush so much into things. So yeah, give me the papers. I just get it signed as long as I get approved. And they rush into decisions that were bad decisions, that were poor decisions. And then we pay the consequence for those things. So when we look at this example of Genesis 16, we see that Sarah is telling Abraham, let's make this decision. Let's rush into making this decision. Let's help out God. Sometimes people change jobs like changing socks, right? Or you rush into a relationship, making quick decisions, about starting a relationship or ending a relationship without understanding the emotional distress or turmoil. And we just go in and we want things to happen right away, or we go out without thinking the effects of it. So Sarah, she was impatient. Her impatience with God's timing led her to poor decisions. So we got to think before we make decisions in our lives. Are we making this decision without considering everything that is going to involve this decision? Number two, another second thing that we can learn from this is that all that impatience does is that it reflects a lack of trust in God. It reflects the lack of trust in God. That's why after Abraham had been living there in Canaan for 10 years, after 10 years, God had showed them that they can trust in him. But Sarah was still Abraham was being discouraged in the previous chapter, in chapter 15. Now, Sarah is being impatient. So she was lacking trust in God at that moment. There are moments in our lives, no matter how strong our faith is, there are moments, there are situations in our lives when we lack trust in God. We don't trust God fully the way we should. Impatience is the ability. And see if you can you identify yourself doing this sometimes? Impatience is the ability or the unwillingness to wait or delay gratification. We're not willing to wait. We're not willing to, wait for what's good, for what God had said. It is a feeling or restlessness, an irritation that arises from a desire for immediate results. We want immediate results because we want to feel satisfaction now. So waiting is not a good idea. And that's why impatience often leads to hurried decisions and actions, because one finds it difficult to tolerate delays or obstacles. I don't tolerate delays. What do you mean waiting? So impatience a lot of times reflects our lack of trust in God. God's timing is the best timing. So because of impatience, we make poor decisions. And because of impatience, we just showed that we're lacking trust in God when we become impatient. Number three, impatience causes conflict. Do you experience any conflict at home because of impatience? Do you experience any conflict at home because of impatience? Look at verse 6. Look at verse 4 and 5. He slept with Hagar, right? So he experienced this right away. And she conceived, so Hagar got pregnant, and when she knew she was pregnant, now she was despising Sarai. She was despising Sarai. And so Sarai, so now Hagar is having trouble. But now Hagar is having trouble with Sarai. She's despising Sarai. And now Sarai is having trouble with Abraham. And now Abraham is having trouble with Sarai. So I don't know how patient you are with your mate. But when you're not patient in a relationship, lack of patience is always going to bring you trouble. Lack of patience is always going to be, let's hurry up. Why are you so slow? Why do you take your time all the time? What do you mean planning? Let's just jump in the car and get going. Impatience brings problems. It brings conflict. I don't know if you've ever been impatient when you're driving on the road. And when you're driving on the road, if you're being impatient and you're cutting people off, and then you're so rushing, right? And then you get to the red light. And you stop at the red light, and all of a sudden you see that little guy that's just like cruising, chilling, and they get to the red light. I just passed this guy. But now he got to the light at the same time I did. I don't know. I got a camera in all of your cars. But sometimes I do that stuff. Sometimes when I'm in a rush, it's like, you know what? Why am I rushing? Because I'm going to get there at the same time, basically, that person is going to get there too. But a lot of road rage happens when we're impatient. It creates conflict. It creates conflict. And there have been people who have been killed for being impatient. It creates conflict. So Sarah's impatience led to a relationship strife. And it led to conflict between her, Abraham, and Hagar. Now creating a hostile environment within their household. Because they were not patient with one another. And they were not patient with waiting on God. Now Sarah, she's blaming Abraham for a decision she made. Now Abraham says, no, I don't want to take responsibility for that. That's your deal. And what does Hagar do? Hagar just runs away from the problem. Because she's not patient to wait on God. For God to give the answer to the problem. So, and that's what we see in verse 6. She flees from her mistress. And that takes us to chapter to our fourth point. Impatience can lead us to regret. Have you ever regretted a decision you made because you didn't think about it? Because you didn't wait? Maybe you should have waited a little longer. Maybe you bought that thing that you wanted so much when it wasn't on sale. And all of a sudden, the next day it goes on sale, 50% off. And you're like, what? Let's go return it. And maybe you already worried. So what do? How many times do we make decisions that later on we regret because we rush? Remember that movie, Fools? What was it called? Fools what? You guys saw the movie too, huh? Fools rush in. And it is true. A lot of times we rush into things and we regret it. So your servant, it says, your servant is in your hands, Abraham said. And now, now that we're dealing with these things, now you got regrets because she got pregnant. Isn't that what you wanted, Sarah? Now that she gets pregnant, you regret it? Do whatever you want with her. She's your servant. And so Sarai mistreated Hagar. Like, it wasn't really Hagar's fault. It was Sarah's. It was Abraham. They were both responsible. So Hagar just flees away. And so we see here that Sarai's action was driven by impatience, led to regret at this point. Regret often follows when the initial excitement or relief of a quick decision fades. Because sometimes we make a quick decision when we're so excited. Something is so exciting. We make a quick decision, and when that excitement is fading, then reality sets in, and we realize, man, we should have just waited. So the pain of regret serves as a powerful reminder of the value of patience. When we experience the pain of regrets, we should be encouraged to slow down and consider all aspects before making a decision for our future. We should just slow down. Let me consider all aspects. What is going to happen here? What is going to happen there? I wish life had a rewind button. Well, it doesn't. And because we're impatient, sometimes we make the wrong decision. So number 5, impatience can cause you to run away from the problem. Have you ever got impatient that you're like, you know what, I'm out of here? Some people just decide, I'm getting out of here. I'm not going to deal with this issue. I don't want to deal with it. And so basically Hagar runs away. She runs away, and the angel of the Lord found Hagar near the spring in the desert, and it was the spring. It was a spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from, and where do you think you're going? Where are you going? And Hagar said, I'm running away from my problem. Instead of waiting on God, she was running away from her problem. I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai, she answered. Impatience can indeed lead to tendency of running away from your problems. Let me give you just a quick advice. Running away from your problem is not going to fix the problem. You have to deal with it. You have to face the situation. You have to face the problem. When we're faced with difficult situations, the urge to resolve things quickly can be overwhelming. And instead of trusting in God's timing and wisdom, impatience drives us to take and to make matters worse. Because it drives us to take matters into our own hands, so it makes things worse. Often seeking immediate relief or escape from that discomfort, what we do is we try to run away from the problem. And that's what Hagar is doing here. So running away, impatience will make you a lot of times run away from your problem. Running away from the problem is not going to fix it. Then the angel of the Lord, in verse 9, the angel of the Lord told her, go back. In other words, go back and deal with it. Running away, it's not going to fix it. Go back and deal with it and submit to her. And the angel added, I will increase your descendants. So you too are going to have a lot of descendants. So much that it will be so numerous to count. And the angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now pregnant and you will give birth to a son, and you should name his name Ishmael. For the Lord has heard your misery. Interesting that Abraham didn't know this was going to happen. Sarai didn't know what was going to happen, because impatience leads to results in unintended consequences. Impatience results in unintended consequences. So it's like, oh, I didn't mean for that to happen. Number 6. Look at this picture. This guy is trying to fix this little house, right? Now let's put the picture back. This guy is trying to fix this thing, and he tells the other guy, I need a rock this size, just a little rock. But the little rock is right here. Once he takes that rock, he's not thinking about the consequence. Because once he takes that little rock off, all those big rocks are going to come down on him. A lot of times when we make that decision, this is just a simple thing that we're doing. What we don't realize is the consequence is going to be bigger, because it's going to have a snowball effect a lot of times. So they did not think it was going to be a big deal. Now they're seeing that it's becoming a big deal. Impatience results in unintended consequence. To what point? Look at what it says in verse 12. Let's move forward on the slides. Look at what it says in verse 12. It says, he will be a wild donkey of a man. He's going to be a hard-headed. Wait a minute. Abraham, did you think about this before you went into bed with another woman? That the child she was going to give you, you didn't know. He was not going to be a legit child. Because the child, the one that you were promised, was going to be it. But now that you have, and you know, Ishmael was going to be 14 years old by the time the promised child came. Because Abraham had been right now in Canaan for 11 years now. Because he was 10 years. Hagar gets pregnant. It goes for about 9 months. So it's 11 years. And then Abraham had to wait another 14 years for the promised child. He was 86 years old when Ishmael is born. According to chapter 16, verse 16, he was 86 years old, and he is 100 years old when Isaac is born, the child of the promised child. So he had to wait another. So now Ishmael is 14 years old. Now let me just tell you, the unintended consequences, we don't think about that when we become impatient. We just think about we want to get things done. We want to do things our way. We want to do it quick, and let's do it now. You know, up to this day, what the consequences are? Ishmael has a lot of descendants, just like the angel of the Lord promised. The descendants from Ishmael are all the Arab nations who hate the nation of Israel, who are the descendants from Isaac, the child of the promise. Why do you think Arab nations and Israel can never get along? They're brothers. They're brothers. They're family. Do you have any family you get in? I'm sure you do. But they're brothers, and they cannot get along. They all claim, no, we are the people of God. No, we are the people of God. Now, in reality, the people of Israel is the people of God. They're the chosen people from God. And I'm not going to get I'm not going to talk politics here because of everything that's going on right now. In the Middle East, that conflict keeps on going. It's been going on for thousands of years. It's been going on for so long because of Sarah and Abraham got impatient back in the days. And she said, go to bed with my servant. No big deal. Now, there is conflict. And that's why he said, that's why the angel of the Lord told Hagar, he will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. So in other words, he's always going to be having conflict with people. And he will live in hostility towards all his brothers. Impatience results in unintended consequence. So what do we learn from this? As we think about the story in Genesis 16, let's remember how important it is to be patient when we make decisions. Let's remember how important it is to make decisions, to be patient. So I want to encourage you to leave here today ready to pray for patience in your life. Imagine how much better things could be if we waited for God's timing in our lives instead of rushing things ourselves. Just think about that one time when you rush things in your life and things didn't go well. It pays off to be patient. Think about how calm and strong we can be when we choose to trust God instead of hurrying. As we go in this week, let's try to pick patience over hurry. Let's try to trust over trying to control everything ourselves, because we get impatient because a lot of times we want to control things. And let's trust in God's perfect timing over rushing things. Only fools rush in. When we do this and we are patient, we honor God. And we honor God, we show that we trust in God's timing. We show that we also seek God's guidance. When we are patient, we also show that we value relationships with one another. Because the Bible says that we need to be patient with one another. When we have patience, we are called to consider the consequences. When we are patient, we learn from past mistakes. I made that mistake because I was impatient. And as the saying goes, those who do not learn from their past are doomed to do what? To repeat it. How many times have we hurt ourselves or other people because we were impatient? Let's learn from the past. But above all, let's learn to trust in God. Let's choose to be patient and avoid the dangers of impatience. And you might be here today and you might say, Pastor, but that is so hard to do. I know it's hard. I fall into impatience many times, but I know that I can turn, my life's control can go in God's hands. I can turn the control of my life to God, and God can help me learn to be patient. It is not impossible, but what is impossible to us, it is possible for God. So it might be so hard. You don't know how hard it is for me to be patient. Well, I know it's hard for everybody, but it's not impossible for God. Now the question is, have you turned your life to God? Only He can give you that. That's why we have to rely on God every single day of our lives. We have to keep on trusting. We have to wake up every morning and say, Lord, I'm trusting my life in your hands today. Just like I did yesterday, just like I'm going to do tomorrow. Because I don't have the power to do a lot of things that I need to do. So Lord, I'm trusting in you for patience. It's not my nature. So our Father in heaven, we thank you so much today, Lord. We thank you so much for giving us your word. We thank you so much for helping us learn how dangerous it is not to be patient. We thank you for the scriptures that you have given us. And I just want to pray, Father, that if some of us here are having a hard time being patient, I'm praying, Lord, that we will be able to turn over things to you and trust in you and trust in your timing and value the relationships that we have and value everything that you have done for us so that we don't destroy all those things, all those people that we love because of our impatience. I pray, Lord, that we will turn the control of our lives to you. And if you have never given your life to Christ, if you have never turned your life to Him, this is the day you can do it. Lord, you might say, Lord, I cannot do this on my own. But Jesus says, I can do this with you. So if you want to turn your life to Christ, all you have to say is you just got to tell Him, Lord, I'm coming before you and I'm asking you for the forgiveness of my sins. Forgive me for what I have done wrong. Forgive me for sinning against you. Forgive me for not trusting in you. From now on, I want to trust in you. I want to turn my life over to you. I pray that you will take me and make me part of your family. Father, if anyone has made this prayer, has expressed these words to you, I just pray, Lord, that we will be able to come alongside and help them grow in their walk of faith. I pray for our church as we grow in our patience and as we grow in our faith, trusting in you. In your name we pray. And all God's people say, Amen. God bless you this morning.